Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we have our updated Week 10 rest of season running back rankings here for 2021 fantasy football. We've got players coming back off injuries. We've got players who have went down with injuries, and so we've got a shuffling up of the board after we've seen some past performances here over the past couple of weeks since we last made this episode in Week 8. Remember, if you've been around here watching these episodes, we post the running back position every 2 weeks on the even weeks here, so weeks 12, 14, 16, etc. in the future. And then in the week in between, so the odd number weeks, we post the rest of season wide receiver episodes. So if you're new around here to the channel, make sure to drop down and click that subscribe button and turn the bell on so you never miss one of those videos. But with that being said, let's hit the intro and get right into today's episode. Alrighty, here we go. So we're going to try and keep today's episode fairly efficient and move through things at a good pace. My past couple rest of season rankings videos went a little long, so we're going to try and keep things moving forward a bit quicker in today's video. Jonathan Taylor's my rest of season RB1 at this point in time. No more Derrick Henry. There's a new king at the top of the throne here. His name is Jonathan Taylor in the AFC South, the same division. 15.5 points or more in half PPR scoring in 6 straight performances. The best part, the thing I love most about this, Jonathan Taylor hasn't rushed for over 20 attempts once yet this NFL season. He has had more than 20 touches. Let's not confuse those two things. But 20 pure rushing attempts has not occurred once for JT yet this season. What does that mean? They're keeping his young legs fresh. They're keeping him healthy. And for the long haul this season, I think he'll be able to sustain these numbers because the wear and tear on his body isn't going to be increasingly high. I also think the schedule is fairly favorable for a player of this status as well. Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers is my rest of season RB2 here. Now, Christian missed 5 games, but in his first game back, 18 touches from scrimmage, over 100 yards as well total through the air and on the ground. I believe he had 54 yards rushing, 52 yards receiving. McCaffrey, he's one of the most dynamic backs in the game. We just need him out there on the field, available, healthy, ready to play for us. We all know when he's out there, he's a great fantasy star, but obviously availability has been a bit of an issue the past couple seasons. If he can stay out there, he's the top of the class here, and he's someone you absolutely want on your teams. Dalvin Cook is our number 3 running back for the rest of this season. Now, Dalvin Cook's biggest concern for me actually lies off the field rather than his performance on the field. Based off of what we've heard right now, based off of Dalvin's side of the story, it appears that he's in the clear. It appears that he was the victim of the incident that I am vaguely referring to because just like hasn't been reported to the community and the public, I also don't know all the details of the situation, so I can't tell you for certain if this is going to impact the rest of his fantasy season. Based off of what we've heard so far, it appears that Dalvin has done nothing wrong. It appears that he is going to not be affected in any way, shape, or form by league policy rules or restrictions throughout the rest of the 2021 season. Let's hope that's the case and that we don't have to talk about this again the rest of this year. But Dalvin Cook this year has been, he's been another player, another star running back who has missed time. And 21 points is his season high so far in 2021. That's a great number to be at, but I think that for where we drafted Dalvin Cook, maybe the 2nd or 3rd pick in your fantasy drafts, we would like to see a little bit of a higher ceiling implemented here. But again, we have a limited sample size in compared to some of the other backs, namely Jonathan Taylor, who's above him on the list here, or even a Christian McCaffrey, who obviously has missed time as well, but has put up higher ceiling numbers. Cook, though, he has rushed over 100 times, 3 times this season. He's got only 2 touchdowns on the year, so those are certainly things that I expect that he will continue to put up those really, really strong rushing yardage games. And then additionally, the touchdowns will come alongside of that as he gets more and more involved in this Vikings backfield. But he's back to himself now. He's going to get his numbers. He looked fantastic last week in the touches he had. Dalvin Cook moving forward, absolutely a top-flight fantasy running back. Up next here at number 4, we've got Austin Ekeler of the LA Chargers. We've been calling him Mini McCaffrey all season long now. And while he can't officially take Christian McCaffrey's name, he has been the more useful fantasy player at this point in the year because at the end of the day, availability and reliability has fantasy utility for us. And Austin Ekeler has certainly been on the field much more than Christian McCaffrey, who has, again, missed 5 games to start out 2021 here, and we've got a ways to go. So let's hope that number doesn't climb anymore. But Austin Ekeler, in PPR leagues, he has been a machine. 7 games in a row with 3+ receptions, 3 being the floor. He has certainly went higher above that marker, and he's getting the job done on the ground. Had a clutch rushing attempt last week. For this Chargers offense, he is very, very important. He is a key and crucial part of what this offense does. And when you're catching passes from a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who is as smart and cerebral as he is, makes the right plays, gets Austin Ekeler in positions to succeed, I like the direction that this offense is going. And the trend for the Chargers offense has, in general, been very high production. They've had a few blunders, a few down games. But when you're playing in an offense, scoring this many points, you're going to get opportunities to find the end zone, extend drives, be on the field for long periods of time. That's another thing you'd love to see in a running back situation. Moving into the number 5 spot now, Najee Harris is somebody who has steadily climbed upwards on this list. Throughout the entire course of the season, his dynamic playmaking ability has been on full display from week 1 all the way now until week 10. 22 or more rushing attempts has been the amount of absurd volume he's been seeing the last 4 weeks in a row, and in the last 7 weeks, 14.5, which is the point output he had this past week against Chicago, is his lowest scoring game of the last 7 weeks. You're talking about his floor over the last dang near 2-month time period being 14.5 fantasy points. I will take that every single day of the week. The only possible potential concern I have with Najee right now is that the touch count is so high. I don't want him to burn out, get injured, or be at increased risk to just wearing down because of the volume he's seeing and have that impact him later in the season, though. But he's a rookie. He's got fresh legs in that sense. I think Najee Harris can finish off this fantasy season really strong for us. Alvin Kamara takes a slight dip on the list in today's episode now. We've seen some encouraging things from Alvin Kamara over the past couple of weeks, and namely this past week with Trevor Siemian under center, 7 targets for Alvin Kamara, but the quarterback situation is still clearly the most pressing concern for his fantasy situation. Kamara, though, and this ties into Jameis Winston prior to Trevor Siemian's whatever you want to call it, stint as the starting quarterback for the Saints. He's not their long-term option. He's simply the fill-in replacement for the injured Jameis Winston. 30 targets in the last 4 weeks for Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. Those are great numbers to see. But again, we have a very small sample size of Alvin Kamara working with Trevor Siemian. So we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks here. Is Trevor Siemian going to be able to maintain Kamara's level of receiving involvement? That's going to be a huge box to check for this offense and for this fantasy situation. If Kamara can do it, if Siemian can give enough looks, he remains a top-level fantasy running back. I've moved him down just a slight touch here on the list as a precautionary factor in this situation. It took Jameis a few weeks to get under control and to realize that Alvin Kamara was one of his best options on the field to throw the football to. I think Siemian is a little bit more of a cerebral player, and the fact that he's a more veteran presence, he has less ability to make plays with his legs like a Jameis Winston does. He doesn't have as much improvisational skill, and he doesn't have as much big playmaking skill as a Jameis does, who can scramble around the pocket and make big throws downfield. Siemian has to rely on his tools upstairs a little bit more. He has to make the smart checkdowns, make the easy reads, and throw to the open receiver. A lot of times, I think that's going to be Kamara here. So I think that Siemian can maintain this level of success. I wish we could still have Jameis under center because, again, he figured it out and he provided those big plays over the top in addition to what he could give Kamara through the receiving game, and that ultimately lightened up the box here. But I think Siemian, again, moving forward, can do enough here. Not saying he's Drew Brees. He's nothing close to Drew Brees. But if he can at least emulate the short passing game to the running backs out of the backfield, that'll do the job here for the rest of this season. Joe Mixon at the number 7 spot, someone I'm very high on the rest of the year. Something very interesting is that Joe Mixon, who has typically been characterized, and especially by the SFS channel here, we have loved Joe Mixon in terms of what he is as a dominant workhorse running back who sees a filthy large amount of volume. He has not taken more than 20 carries since week 2. So the touches are down, but the efficiency for Joe Mixon is up right now. He's being used incredibly dynamic. He is a true 3-down back in today's NFL, scoring touchdowns and getting the job done in both the receiving and rushing phase. You've got Samaje Perine getting more and more touches in this offense. Not that it's a 50-50 split, or not that Perine's even infringing upon Joe Mixon's ability to produce, because I think this actually bodes well for Mixon. These atrociously high volume numbers that we've seen from Joe Mixon in the past were maybe contributors to some of the nagging and wearing injuries that were slowing him down throughout the season and causing him to miss time. Joe Mixon's one of the most talented backs in the league. If he can continue to get the level of involvement he's getting right now, maintain this level of efficiency, and stay clean and healthy in the process, that's going to be a big time key to this fantasy situation and a big factor moving forward. I like how he's been used. I like how they've tried to keep him fresher coming off of that ankle injury that he was able to return back to action from a few weeks back. Ezekiel Elliott, our number 8 back for the Dallas Cowboys. Zeke is definitely not at the peak of his NFL game anymore, but he is still right in the thick of things in terms of valuable fantasy running backs because of the situation he's in. This Dallas Cowboys offense as a whole can be one of the highest scoring units in the league, and when you have two outside wide receivers in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb that can do the damage they can do, stretch the field, an intelligent quarterback like Dak Prescott who can move the football downfield and keep drives moving and sustain long possessions, you're going to get a lot of red zone opportunities. You're going to get a lot of opportunities to score. And like we've talked about a couple times already, just sustain drives and keep your offense on the field. That means more touches. That means more opportunities for Ezekiel Elliott. And when this offense is so incredibly balanced, the defense is kept honest, and that opens up run lanes. You can't just stack the box and bring your safeties up. You got to sit them back because they've got two outside receivers that can go over the top on you in a blink of an eye. So Zeke here, not exactly the highest of upside plays, but I feel really safe in his floor. He's doing some receiving work as well. Zeke, someone I feel confident in the rest of the season. Nick Chubb at the number 9 spot. You might ask, why is Nick Chubb so low? The reason that I am not as high on Nick Chubb as I am on other players is because long term, I can already see ahead to Kareem Hunt's return here and anticipate the return of touchdown vulturing that we saw the first month or so of the season that really ate into Nick Chubb's workload. I mean, last year it wasn't so much of a big factor, but now Kareem Hunt is legitimately coming in here and scoring high levels of touchdowns. Kareem Hunt's job has always been the receiving department, and that has not been something Nick Chubb's been factored into here. And then just overall the volume distribution. Last week everything went well. Nick Chubb had his best performance of the season, 28.5 points in week 9 and half PPR scoring. He's not going to be able to get to those numbers when Kareem Hunt's out there because he's just not going to see the same workload, the same snap percentage. And even though Dearness Johnson was out there taking snaps, they don't trust him like they trust Kareem Hunt. They're not going to give him the same level of usage and rely upon him as much as they are going to rely upon Nick Chubb. Now, with that being said, Nick Chubb's in concussion protocol, COVID-19 protocols. He's a fully vaccinated player. He needs 2 negative tests, less than 24 hours apart, and he's in for Sunday against the Patriots. I think it's a tough matchup to begin with. The Browns still have a bye coming up here. If Nick Chubb misses this game, you're talking about week 10 moving on. 2 games, you're not going to get any usage out of him if he's not able to clear COVID protocol. So that keeps him a little bit lower, in addition to the fact he's not catching passes this year. He caught a pass last week, but it was very fluky. If you watch the game, he ended up having a weird, awkward-looking toe drag where he basically just sat down like 20 yards downfield in the hole in the zone. It was a weird play. But anyways, Nick Chubb, I think he's got some limitations. In the long-term perspective of this season, love him as a player. He's a great running back, but a lower-end RB1 the rest of the season. Darrell Henderson's our RB10 here. So whereas some of these other players, like a Nick Chubb, for example, is an elite running back talent, Darrell Henderson has an elite running back situation. I don't think he does anything at an elite level. He doesn't do any eye-popping skills or flash any capabilities that I say, wow, other running backs just can't do that. But what he is in is a Los Angeles Rams offense that can move the ball like almost no other team in the league can this year. And you just add in Odell Beckham Jr., I think that this offense is going to be so high-flying that they're just going to move the football down the field at will, even more so and to a greater extent than they already have done this season, which doesn't seem possible. But Darrell Henderson here, we've talked about this like 5 times already in this episode, but when you've got an offense that's humming, moving the ball downfield, moving the chains, you're out on the field for long possessions, getting lots of rushing attempts, leading football games late, getting those extra, wind the game down, just grind it out, tough yards at the end of fourth quarters in the football games. Darrell Henderson's got a lot of valuable touches, opportunities, red zone looks, goal line carries. He's basically got everything that a dream fantasy running back situation has outside of elite running back talent. And that is what Cam Akers was supposed to be for us this season. But Darrell Henderson's the best we've got to work with moving forward here. He can catch the ball in the backfield as well in the running back screen game. Can't complain too much. Darrell Henderson's been a very sturdy low-end running back one who has had 2 down performances this year. But outside of that, the stats have been fantastic, and the resulting fantasy output has been very desirable as well. DeAndre Swift is another player who makes the lower-end RB1 category. The reasoning here is that DeAndre Swift really doesn't do all that much work as a pure running back. His highest rushing output of the season is actually only 51 rush yards. What he is an elite receiving back. He doesn't get good game scripts, That's something that we projected for him in this offseason, thought would be a bigger deal. But the touchdowns and the pass-catching involvement in PPR has kept him very, very relevant this year. And I don't really see that changing the rest of the way. His toughest matchups he's got the rest of the year is at Cleveland and against the Chicago Bears, and those matchups are both coming up in the next couple of weeks here after Pittsburgh this week. So you're getting out of the woods in terms of long-term difficult matchups. They're very manageable from here on out. I think DeAndre Swift, with the explosive ability, the playmaking, if you're in a PPR league, no reason to be concerned with him. He's got an excellent, excellent ceiling. Aaron Jones is our last RB1 in 12-team leagues, our RB12. The thing here for me with Aaron Jones is A.J. Dillon has become too involved in this offense. Early on in the season, it was A.J. Dillon taking red zone looks and red zone opportunities. And lately, it's been overall touches. The last 2 weeks, Aaron Jones has had to sacrifice 12 touches to A.J. Dillon against the Cardinals and 16 other way around. 16 against the Cardinals, 12 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Dillon's catching balls, rushing the football, running physical and hard downhill. They're alternating series and possessions, which is something we saw with Jamal Williams last year. But I think that A.J. Dillon is actually a better talent and a better overall player as a running back than Jamal Williams. They're both very, very talented backs. We were very fortunate to have all 3 of them in the backfield for a point of time. But at this point, when you've got a bowling ball, a battering ram like A.J. Dillon, you have to expect that now Aaron Jones still does receive a healthy amount of goal line work, but there's a fine line here with how high of highs Aaron Jones could now have in fantasy because you're deferring so many touches, such a significant and key portion of your fantasy role to another player, and that's just the situation, the reality of what's going on right now. There's only so much you can do. So Aaron Jones, the explosive plays haven't quite been where they've been at in the past couple of seasons, whether it's scheming, lack of consistent high volume games. He's still getting enough volume to be a lower end RB1 and a fantasy relevant scorer. But in terms of, running backs talk about they need a certain amount of touches to get in a rhythm. And then eventually it just clicks. They break off a home run ball, and that's a day for him. But Aaron Jones has struggled to find those type of opportunities this year. I will say David Bakhtiari, their best offensive lineman, is returning. That is good news for the Packers and their run game in particular for both parties, A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. But looking forward, I would keep your expectations for Aaron Jones' ceiling within a reasonable scope of things because I think at the end of the day, it's probably a little bit lower than what we anticipated on draft day back in August. James Robinson, my number 1 fringe RB1, my top of the crop for the RB2 positions. He's returning from a heel injury right now. That's the main thing that's got him lower on this list. He is the definition of a workhorse running back for the Jaguars offense. The Jags go as James Robinson does. He scores touchdowns, he catches passes, and he always finds a way to gain positive yardage. If James Robinson wasn't the player he is, this Jags team would look even more atrocious than it already is. And you saw last week even, They weren't able to run the football super effectively against the Bills. Only scored 9 points, won that game 6-9 or 9-6. They need him. And he sets up their pass game because when he runs efficiently, they're able to throw the ball downfield. And when that's able to happen, Marvin Jones makes big plays. Trevor Lawrence is able to come in here and obviously be a more effective quarterback. This is a very key and critical loss for this team. They are going to welcome him back with open arms. Now, it's not a given that he's going to play here in Week 10. It's hopeful. Urban Meyer is optimistic that that'll be the case. But boy, oh boy, do fantasy managers and the Jacksonville Jaguars alike miss James Robinson. Cordarrelle Patterson, the number 14 spot. Say what you will. He's dynamic. His involvement is too good to keep him lower on the list, if you ask me. He's been too consistent. Since Week 2, the numbers have been there each and every single time. He switches up how he gets the job done. He doesn't have a consistent week-over-week outlook, but the numbers show up at the end of the day. Some games, he'll only have a couple targets, only a couple catches, and he'll get all of his work done on the ground, score a rushing touchdown. Other games, like last week, nothing, nada. The receiving games where everything came from. He couldn't run the ball to save his life. The Saints defense quite literally covers every blade of grass in the run game, and Cordarrelle Patterson still found a way to thrive, score 16 fantasy points in half PPR. He's just found a way to make it click. Super versatile, super dynamic, late career breakout, but it's better late than never. Cordarrelle Patterson is a prime example of that. Saquon Barkley at the number 15 spot. We all agree, I would think, that he should be higher on this list, and that Saquon, if he could stay healthy, would still be on this list. But we're starting to walk the fine line here where availability and reliability are starting to become a very major and concerning question mark for Saquon. And I was in the camp this offseason that was in favor of saying Saquon Barkley is not an injury-prone player. He is a player who has happened to get injured. But the frequency and the amount of times that this has occurred is starting to make me alter my stance. And I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want to classify a player as an injury-prone player. But Saquon has been injured quite a large amount of times. For a player of this youthful age, and for, while he does play one of the most violent positions in all of sports, he's too young, too athletically gifted, and for the player who's supposed to be the generational running back talent, he has been, quite honestly, I mean, I don't want to say Saquon Barkley has been a bust. I think that's going too far, but he's been a very, very let down and disappointing pick for the number 2 overall draft selection. He's explosive as all heck. He can score in a flash. He is certainly the best player in the Giants offense. They need him. They want him back very badly. But are you confident when Saquon returns that he will be back for every single game down the stretch of this season? Matchups for me with Saquon, he produced one of his best games of the year, if not his best, against the New Orleans Saints defense, which we just talked about being one of the toughest units in the National Football League. He can get it done against anybody because he is so naturally gifted, because he is so explosive. It literally just takes him finding a small crease and getting out into space to make a massive run or reception happen. So Saquon is someone that talent indicates to me he needs to be higher on this list, but the situation of playing for the dumpy Giants right now, who have been keeping games close lately, but not necessarily a team that's consistently able to close or move the football down the field and score relevant points, I'm going to keep him a little bit lower. I love to see Saquon crack back into the RB1 discussion by the season's end, but for right now, I'm a little bit skeptical, and it seems like, too, every week it starts off with great news about Saquon. We expect him to play, and not even necessarily we as in myself, the fantasy hosting app platforms, ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo, NFL Fantasy, they're the last 2 weeks at least, Saquon has started the week projected points, and then we get through the practice week, find out he's not ready to go, and then obviously that drops back to 0, and then Wayne Gallman comes out here, or excuse me, not Wayne Gallman, that was last season. Devontae Booker comes out and balls out last week against the Panthers and the Raiders that he had, or was it? I'm really goofing here. It's the Chiefs and the Raiders that he was able to have those 2 good games against. We would have loved to see Saquon out there on the field for those games. he would have absolutely tore it up. Way more explosive than Devontae Booker is. But obviously, that's not the situation we have right now. So, fingers crossed. We're hoping Saquon Barkley, please come back healthy. Fantasy owners, we all need you. And the Giants clearly need you as well. He can get the job done. He's just got to be available. That's the number one thing for Saquon going forward. David Montgomery, the Chicago Bears, someone who has quickly jumped up my list, made his debut, or not debut, but his return in a game against the Steelers on Monday Night Football this past week, also known as the under-the-radar Justin Fields breakout performance. If you didn't watch that game, the stats won't tell you that Justin Fields was dominant, might be too far of an extent to say, but he was dang impressive, looked very, very poised, could clearly tell he's the quarterback of the future for the Bears after watching that performance. And they broke David Montgomery back into playing football in that contest. David was not necessarily uber productive, not uber efficient, but he got in there, cracked pads with the defense of the Steelers, a very good defensive unit, a lot of respectable players over there, and he just got back out there playing football. And hopefully on a longer week now, he gets the time to rest, recover, get integrated back into his full workload with this offense, and then moving forward, here he takes off. This is another example of a workhorse build running back. He can get the goal line carries, catch passes out of the backfield. He runs hard and physical, finishes every play. An excellent player to have on your team. If you're able to go buy low for him, this is a great opportunity for return on investment because David Montgomery is going to finish this season very strong if he can stay healthy. James Conner, not someone we expected to have on the list, a new face on the top 24 for this week. James Conner is simply on here because Chase Edmonds is hurt. And while I don't think James Conner is a workhorse running back in the National Football League or someone who's very explosive and talented, he's got a great situation. You talk about a Darrell Henderson, a player who also, he's not the most explosive player in the world, not necessarily a starting level back on any given team in this league, but when you're a 50-50 split back almost with Chase Edmonds in terms of the total touches you see, and Chase Edmonds goes down, you've now got a wealth of opportunity sitting in front of you, and James Conner is tied for the league lead with the now injured, broken foot, Derrick Henry, or I guess it was technically a fractured foot. He didn't actually break it all the way. He did have surgery, which will keep him out a long time, but we could potentially see him back. That is Derrick Henry the last couple weeks of the year, maybe even the last 3 weeks of the year if he recovers at a very quick speed. But James Conner is at the top of the league in terms of rushing touchdowns scored. He's got 10 of them, so already in the double-digit department. And now you're talking about a player who inherits Chase Edmonds' receiving work and gets a few more touches on the ground as well. He has uncontested. I mean, Eno Benjamin is in the backfield. He'll see some looks, but in terms of goal line usage, James Conner is uncontested to just punch it in whenever they get down the 1 or 2 yard line. And he showed us last week he can catch the ball out in space. So for as long as Chase Edmonds is out of the lineup here, this could change drastically if Chase is able to recover very quickly. It's looking like he's not going to be able to play this week. James Conner, he can get the job done again. The touchdown count has been ridiculous. And if he can start putting up yardage in both the rushing and receiving game, just total scrimmage yardage output, that's going to be a big-time contributor for him down the stretch. Elijah Mitchell at number 18 here. This is just a solid number 2 fantasy running back. Nothing too flashy here. This is just the lead back in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and the running backs that are at the top of the depth chart tend to put up very quality fantasy points. Until last week when he caught 5 of his 5 targets, Eli Mitchell hasn't been overly involved in the receiving game. He's only got 9 targets on this season. Ironically, he's caught all 9 of them. Elijah Mitchell's not someone who has a terribly high ceiling either. He definitely has a very stable fantasy floor. That's something that I really like about him and what keeps him up here at the number 18 spot. Typically, Kyle Shanahan backfields are a nightmare and unpredictable, but it has been Mitchell's show the entire time this season, so it's nice to see that consistent dependability out of him. Long term here, as long as you're still scoring touchdowns, getting some good rushing yardage output, because again, not overly involved in the receiving game. If last week was a telltale sign for the rest of this season, Eli Mitchell's got room to grow up this list, because if he sees that level of receiving involvement, his efficiency is going to increase. He's going to see just more fantasy output and PPR scoring because of how he's getting his touches. So that's something to watch here. because it was a one-game anomaly up until now, I'm going to keep him back here at number 18, but definitely someone who has the potential to grow his number ranking on this list. Leonard Fournette, someone today I like more in my fantasy lineup than Elijah Mitchell. But what I don't love about Leonard Fournette is down the stretch in weeks 14 through 17 in the fantasy playoffs when you need your most productive output from your fantasy players. His playoff schedule is brutal. You don't want anything to do with it. Buffalo, New Orleans, and Carolina, all difficult running defensive units for opposing teams to face. The Saints, probably the toughest. You've got the Bills, who statistically I think are ranked number 1 right now. The Saints very closely behind them. And then Carolina, who against teams starting fantasy running backs have been very, very stingy. So Leonard Fournette long-term this year, not someone that in the waning weeks of the season, when you're looking to win those league prizes, I'm too excited about having in my lineup. But today, if you ask me, is Leonard Fournette a quality lineup start? I'd say he's a very, very solid running back too. He can go out there, put up ceiling numbers, get those goal line touches. He's in an offense as well, similar to a Darrell Henderson. They move the football downfield. TB12's got that offense moving, scoring points, and getting opportunities to put up more fantasy points. Josh Jacobs, somebody who is rising slowly but surely up the rest of season rankings list. Post Gruden, the numbers are up, the production is there. He's impressed me since John Gruden has left Las Vegas. More receiving involvement, more efficiency in the ground game, 5.8 yards per carry last week, 73 yards on the ground, a season high for Jacobs. And again, seeing more passes come his way, 3.5 receptions over the last 2 weeks. I've cited those stats probably, I don't even have those written down on my note sheet. I've cited those stats probably 4 or 5 times in the past week because of how much we've talked Josh Jacobs here on the channel over the past 7-day period. But that shows you he's gaining fantasy relevance. The arrow is pointing upwards. If he can show me more efficiency, more receiving involvement, more touchdown production, anything great and positive for fantasy scoring output purposes, I'm happy to move him up the list here. Derek Carr at one point was leading the league in passing yards. He's no longer doing so, but he's still amongst the top quarterbacks in the league. This offense needs to develop a passing game, or not necessarily develop, but continue to show signs of a strong passing game to keep the boxes light, to keep the defenses balanced, and to keep this offense humming on all cylinders. If they can do that, I don't think anything slows Josh Jacobs down here in the near future. Damien Harris, someone I've got ranked right after Josh Jacobs for the sole fact that Damien Harris, while Josh Jacobs is beginning to expand his workload and accelerate his receiving involvement, Damien Harris has remained very stagnant in that area of the game. It's not something we expected out of him heading into this season. It's not something that is just magically going to appear out of nowhere. Bill Belichick has a different role, a different usage level for every one of those backs he's got on that roster, and that's just not Damien Harris's workload and involvement on this team. He's been scoring touchdowns, very, very involved. I believe it must be 6 games in a row now with Damien Harris to score a touchdown. But other running backs, this is another reason for concern here. Not something to panic about, but something to at least bring into consideration, is that Ramondre Stevenson and Brandon Bolden are becoming increasingly more involved. Ramondre Stevenson had his best game of the season last week, and while Damien Harris and Ramondre Stevenson both left that game with head injuries, neither of them have been able to practice yet this week as of Thursday. They're both still very much involved here. Damien Harris is the clear number 1 back, but the others are seeing work. We could potentially be without Harris here in week 10. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully he's healthy. But Damien Harris, a lower end RB2 for me the rest of the way. He's rather touchdown dependent if he does not find the end zone because he's not scoring or receiving those passing attempts, which will get your points up there in PPR scoring. CEH, welcome back to the top 24 list here. Now, leave it to the Kansas City Chiefs for once Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back to then withdraw their rushing attempts and their total amount of usage they give their running backs. Since he's been out, whether it's Darrell Williams, leading the charge, what was it, Derek Gore was involved there for one game. He looked real nice. He was getting carries against the Packers, but not too many. But then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to come back in here, and you're going to see the red zone rushing attempts decrease again. You're going to see probably the passing attempts go down as well because, ironically enough, I feel like they're throwing to the running backs more with Darrell Williams out there than they were with Clyde. But hopefully here you've got yourself far and away the most talented back in the Chiefs backfield. Back on the field, you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire out there catching passes. I hope that Patrick Mahomes starts to get his stuff together, figure out that he needs to check the football down, be more safe in terms of what he's doing. He still needs to push the ball downfield, Tyreek, but he needs to get Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire the ball underneath. I think that'll be a big deal, and I think that Clyde, if used properly, could be a very, very relevant fantasy running back. But we'll see if that's the case. We'll see what Andy Reid's got in store for play calling, what he's going to ultimately choose to direct in CEH's direction. But he's got the potential. He just needs the volume, the opportunities. Heck, who knows? Maybe Clyde will come back here and finally see some red zone work, although he is pretty dang small to be getting carries down there. Chris Carson of the Seahawks, another player returning off of injury. One more note on Clyde is that Eric Bieniemy said he was looking very good at practice, so that's encouraging news to hear out of Chiefs camp as well. Chris Carson has overcome his neck uncomfortability, which has been keeping him out for an extended period of time here. Chris Carson is a very productive fantasy running back when healthy, but back to the Saquon argument, he has been very widely unavailable in mostly every season of his career. In 3 of his 4 games, though, this season, 10.5 points or more of output has come from Chris Carson. He's got 2 15-plus point games in half PPR scoring. He's a really good back. Scores touchdowns, catches passes, does work on the ground. Again, it's a matter of availability. You've got Russell Wilson coming back. Hopefully this overall offense will be trending upwards here in week 10, 11, 12, and moving forward. I think Chris Carson can get the job done. Again, if he stays healthy, it's a big ask at this point, which is something that's unfortunate. But hopefully, I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping for the best here. Chris Carson, number 23, a lower-end RB2, just because of the risk. And then Michael Carter here, our last running back. Now, there are a few running backs who I felt were deserving of consideration for this final spot on the list. Namely, I wanted to include the Denver running backs, Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. But since it's still a tough read as to, I feel like every other week, one gains leverage over the other, and then they just flip-flop. It's like Gordon, 2 touchdowns, Javonte, 111 rushing yards. And like, then this week, Gordon's efficient. This week, Javonte's not. And then back and forth. So that situation is still unfolding. We're still figuring out what the rest of season is going to look like for that situation. If you ask me, I would rather have Javonte because I want the younger, the fresher legs. The trend is that running backs over the back half, the back stretch of a season will break out, and that's why we've got Michael Carter on the list. He had that breakout-esque game a couple weeks back against the Bengals. Wasn't quite up to par the following Thursday on a short week. We'll give him that against the Colts, but he's super dynamic. I love the usage potential he has in this Jets offense. He's got every shot to come out and potentially be a PPR machine out of your RB2 or flex position down the stretch of this season. The one thing that's going to hold him back here, and I actually had him higher on the list today, but I moved him down out of concern for the Jets offense as a whole. Some of the reasons we've talked about today that we love certain running backs over others is because of their team situation and not necessarily who they are as a talent or as a player. And while I love the dynamic ability and skill set that Michael Carter brings to the table, there's a ton of versatility and fantasy lineup utility here. You ultimately can't control Michael Carter. He has some effect on how his team moves the football downfield, but ultimately he can't control blocking. He can't control the passing game, and he can't control wide receiver separation that's going to help his quarterback move the ball downfield. So if you're telling me Michael Carter can't do it all, which I would love to see it if he could, but the Jets, we know who they are. They are not moving the football up and down the field with ease, although I'm sure one of my favorite jokes is that Mike White is the rising GOAT and that he is going to run his way through their competition and just slay every team that walks in front of his path this year. Being a fantasy player and a realist here with the situation, the Jets can't move the ball like the Rams. They can't move the ball like the Cowboys, the Packers, the Bengals that we've seen so far this year. Heck, they can't even move the ball as effectively as even the Colts with Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and those guys over there. So and they are certainly on a lower tier than the other teams I just listed off. The Cardinals would be another great example. The Bucs of teams that move the football very, very effectively. Michael Carter has got his back up against the wall here, and this is definitely a legitimate concern that is working against him. Again, can Michael Carter's production and skill as a player help the Jets move the chains and help him get more opportunities? And obviously, just being the player he is in nature, get passing attempts and rushing attempts, goal line carries, whatnot. Yes, but you can only do so much as a running back. I love the kid. I think he's got a lot of upside here. But he's a lower end RB2 for me until we see more or the situation in New York can evolve a little bit. All right, those are our top 24 running backs for the rest of this fantasy season. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to leave it with a like and click that subscribe button. If you are new around here, also let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Who would you move up? Who would you move down? All that good stuff. Questions, comments, concerns. I'm happy to get back to you guys as much as I can before kickoff this week. So thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will see you guys at the top of week 11 because this is probably our last episode post of the week. But if you want to interact with us more, join the community Discord server down in the description of today's episode. I'll post my prop bets for Thrive Fantasy, which if you go sign up for Thrive, I guess I might as well give them a plug right now. If you sign up for Thrive, deposit between $10 and $100 as a new member and use promo code SIZZLE when you do so. They will give you a 100% deposit match bonus and get you a free SFS Gold monthly membership here from us, or on us rather, for supporting them and going over and signing up for that, helping us out as well. So go check out Thrive. I post my props again so you can bet alongside of me. And then I basically just check in with the Discord every once in a while throughout the games on Sunday, answer a few last-minute questions if there's anything out there, and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace out.